the top of the south because they're not happy with the arrangements that this government has come forward with, and I'm going to talk to that. So I might start, people have been talking about the levies that are going to be paid to taumata Aho-White, which are greater than what would have been paid under Labour's plans. The primary amount of that money is going to actually go to the Commerce Commission for the regulation that they do of the water regulation system. And Mr Speaker, what we heard about Palmerston North having to pay $400,000 a year. In Nelson it'll be $200,000 a year. In Tasman it'll be $350,000 a year. And Nelson Mayor Nick Smith even went on to say that the government is overreaching with the proposed new levy. What I've heard from our local mayors across the top of the south is that it's yet another cost being put on to this is what's reported in the media, so you're disagreeing with what the media reported. And so the mayors across the top of the south are deeply concerned about two things. One, the cost burden being passed on to them and therefore onto the ratepayers. And secondly, the structural arrangements. It is an absolute cluster that we're going to have a water system set up and a structure set up in Nelson where Nelson and Tasman aren't working together. It's absolutely bizarre. When you look at the shared services between Tasman and Nelson, the wastewater Bells Island treatment plant is jointly owned by Nelson and Tasman. It takes wastewater from Nelson, from Richmond, from Brightwater, from Wakefield and Mapua. Yet Nelson and Tasman aren't going to be working together on water, even though they actually co-own assets together. It's utterly bonkers, let alone that Tasman provides water to Nelson for the Wakatu Industrial Estate, which I'm really pleased that the Labor government put money into for the three water systems to help protect so that it doesn't get millions of dollars of damage during flooding, one of those things we paid for. Tasman provides the water to that estate in Nelson, as well as homes in Nelson South, where I live. Yet somehow we're not going to have a shared Nelson-Tasman water system. It's bizarre. But Tasman's probably going to go with Marlborough and possibly going to go with Buller. So we'll have the top of the south, but no Nelson. Now, the advice that Nelson has received shows very clearly that by going alone, they will end up paying more, and myself as a Nelson ratepayer will end up paying more than under Labour's plans. That's the advice they've got. They've chosen to go alone instead of actually working together across the top of the south. And I know that the minister actually wants to see councils working together. Every other part of the country, we are seeing councils get into groups together because it brings down the cost to the ratepayer, especially when you have bizarre situations, absolutely bizarre situations, like Tasman providing services to Nelson, but somehow we're not going to work together. Now, the minister was very forthright about how he'd saved everything for Auckland and cost Auckland all this money. He might have saved Auckland money, but money is going to be lumped onto the rest of the country. The people in the provinces who are going to have smaller asset bases, greater amounts of debt, larger areas to cover, fewer people to actually pay for the water services, all of those small councils are going to end up paying significantly more than under Labour's plans. And that's what all the evidence actually shows. And the minister's refusing to engage in that conversation. Funnily enough, so much of what the government is actually putting in place through all of the bills is comparable to what Labour did. But the missing piece is the sheer number of councils you actually need to have in the room together to get the economies of scale so that you can make the investment you need. And I think the cluster that is happening across the top of the south, where we're going to end up seeing who knows whether Buller and Tasman and Marlborough can even get together. But if they don't, we're going to end up with 4 small councils all operating on their own and every ratepayer paying a significant amount of money without being able to sort out the nonsense because they have to work together because they actually have shared ownership of assets. So for the government to think that somehow they've come up with some magic solution that is better than Labour's plan when the people in the top of the south are going to be paying significantly more money is absolutely bonkers, and I do not commend this terrible bill to the House.
And the interesting part is with the Nelson area is Nelson, Marlborough and Tasman are all unitary authorities. They don't have a regional council. But I don't find it great. Yeah, it's quite unique that they're all unitary authorities over there, which is considering the only other 2 unitary authorities is Auckland, the one we know of, known as the Super City, and the other one is Gisborne.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. But it feels like we've got this issue. We've got this thing in Wellington. We have a lovely arrangement with this council called Porirua, and the proud residents of Tawa, who didn't want to be part of Porirua as part of the 89 reforms and succeeded to Wellington, somehow had a shared asset service with Porirua City Council. The good news is we have a thing called Wellington Water, so it kind of solves some of those problems. But it's quite intriguing that, you're going to have 2 water entities that aren't going to be compatible while simultaneously sharing services. It's like under this new policy, no, we don't want anything to do with Anita's crowd, and Anita don't want anything to do with Tory's crowd, so they're going to sit down there and turn the pipe off at Linden, and all the sewage is going to back up into people's toilets in Tawa.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of the customary marine title. situation where you've got like hapu having historical claims to an area, right? So they get into a position where they go, okay, we're just going to share the asset, and we're seeing a similar thing here with councils. It's like, okay, it's like we've got to share the assets because it lowers down costs, and also it means that we're reliant on each other's services, so we get better communication. This government doesn't seem to be able to see collectivization. It only views individualization or individualism. It doesn't see the fact that sometimes different governing bodies share shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're so right. Yes.
Yeah, it just reminds me of that. It's like, this is the white man version.
And actually, now, looking at it, Nelson's a really weird situation of a council because it's a tiny council by geographical area with a big Melbourne and a big Tasman right next door to it.
Yep.
And they're all unitary authorities because they got rid of the Nelson Melbourne Regional Council. Well, apparently some minister didn't like it. Yeah, so they brought in unitary authorities. And the Kaikoura district had belonged to there, but in the 1992 reforms was transferred to Canterbury Regional Council, which is now known as Environment Canterbury.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me hard out of the Customary Marines title situation. It's like, okay. Hey, I've seen this one. This one isn't you.